Sí le pido a producción que por favor nos traiga a Jack Farley, que cubre obviamente mercados financieros tradicionales, es el presentador de, como digo yo, Monetary Matter, y anteriormente trabajó en Bloomberg, en Deal Breaker, en Real Vision, donde condujo más de 100 entrevistas en formato, digamos, podcast, con una cantidad de luminarias en todo esto que tiene que ver con la parte de política monetaria. Hace un especial énfasis en todo lo que tiene que ver con este proceso. Creo que es interesante que lo traigamos a la tribuna, además de que le doy un aplauso porque es un joven, bastante joven, apenas 28 años, y ya tiene una cantidad de exposición con esta cantidad de gente que realmente está tratando de entender hacia dónde va la política monetaria. Jack, we are very happy to have you here in the Tribune, the extension of Wall Street Live. It's an honor to have you, and probably you can start telling us what's moving the markets right now, which is the biggest question everybody is questioning itself at this time. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Victor. Buen dia, buen negocio. Thank you so much for having me. I think what is moving the markets over the past few weeks has clearly been the Trump tariff talks. You know, Victor, I've specialized in monetary policy, so many of my interviews focus on the Federal Reserve and monetary policy. And there was a day, you know, we had our day in the sun, 2022, 2023, when that was moving the markets. But it's quite clear to me, Victor, I've got to close my textbook on Federal Reserve, and I've got to open up on trade. And I think investors have to do the same. It is President Trump. It is fiscal policy. It is trade, announced trade tariffs, rumored trade tariffs, and eventually, as we will see on April 2nd next week, imposed tariffs that are moving the market, and it is creating a lot of uncertainty here, Victor.
Excellent. And you were speaking with me, I think it was yesterday, that you think that regardless of what is normally known as the Fed pot, which is basically the ability of the Fed with plenty of ammunition to do, again, quantitative easing or to basically cutting rates, you're still thinking that the Trump pot is the biggest things that we have, because you think that the gorilla in the picture is the Trump administration. I don't know if you can articulate a little bit more about what you think Trump is looking for, because we are kind of lost in terms of understanding what might happen or what might not happen in the first quarter, which is going to end obviously on the 31st, and then on the second quarter based on the uncertainty in these times. Do you have any information of what you think it might happen after April 2, specifically that might affect the construction of the portfolios in this 2025, Jack?
Well, the reason that Trump is in the driver's seat is he is in control to turn a negative dial on the economy with tariffs. The Federal Reserve, they're not going to raise interest rates. The question is how much they're going to cut interest rates. And if anything, I don't think they're going to cut by as much. They're definitely not going to rescue the markets as they did in 2020. I think the April 2nd date has been very keen. President Trump has said he would have done April 1st, but it is April Fool's. He's a superstitious man. And what was supposed to be announced then was reciprocal tariffs as well as sector-specific tariffs. Those sector-specific tariffs are now look like they will be imposed at a later date. But I never really was concerned about those sector tariffs. It is the reciprocal tariffs, Victor, that are concerning me. I think at a time when President Trump is actually letting go of the federal workforce, letting go of trade staff, it will be very difficult to implement. And also, many other countries have tariffs on the United States, so we were going to have to go up to their level of tariff. But what about non-monetary tariffs? Japan has no tariffs on American cars, but they are maybe subsidize their industry and support Japanese auto manufacturers in different way. So non-tariff trade barriers are very important as well. Victor, I know so lucky to be here with your Spanish-speaking audience. Before, I was just looking at the countries, Spanish-speaking countries by trade deficits with the U.S., and actually I couldn't find that many. Mexico is not my words, but what President Trump would call a big offender, probably. But other than Mexico, Spain has a surplus. I believe Colombia has a surplus. So and Trump and Trump's folks, some of whom I've actually have interviewed before, such as the National Economic Chair Steve Murren. He said, and others quoted to Bloomberg and the Financial Times, that what will they focus on is the so-called dirty 15. So the 15% worst nations, or the 15 worst nations. And other than Mexico, I can't find any Spanish-speaking countries. So perhaps the Spanish-speaking world will be largely exempt from the Trump tariff chaos on April 2nd, with the big exception, of course, of Mexico.
Listen, give me a second. I'm going to try to explain it in español quickly what you're saying because it's extremely important. Lo que nos está explicando ya, que obviamente estamos hablando del tema de la política monetaria acá en los Estados Unidos y el impacto de las tarifas, es que antes de que él viniera al programa del día de hoy, muy importante, cuando son las 4:23 de la tarde, hora del este de los Estados Unidos, entiéndanse Miami, Nueva York, Boston, 9:23 para ustedes que nos están viendo desde Madrid, 2:23 para quienes nos ven en Ciudad de México, explica que le llamó mucho la atención que el único país que estaba, digamos, en términos negativos, o que Estados Unidos estaba en términos negativos en la balanza comercial, en términos de los países que hablan español, fue México. Él observaba como Colombia, como Perú, como Chile e indudablemente otros países de la región latinoamericana básicamente importaban más de lo que exportaban a los Estados Unidos y siente que eso puede ser una ventaja a la hora de abrir el abanico de negociaciones con todas estas posibilidades que hay de sentarse en una mesa y conseguir algún tipo de, digamos, posibilidades especiales en ese proceso de la balanza comercial. También nos hablaba de los subsidios que hay por debajo de la mesa, como por ejemplo en la industria automotriz japonesa. Listen, Jack, I think the other part is, how do you think, and probably you have plenty of ammunition to articulate, how do you think China is really responding to this? Because we have rumors that President Xi and Donald Trump will meet at some point, and I know Donald is an expert on doing or making deals, but I don't know how China is really responding, and obviously it's the major issue that I'm seeing in the near future regarding how this tariff will be implemented. Do you have any knowledge of what do you feel China will do to try to make a deal with the U.S. regarding those tariffs and percentage?
Well, Victor, what they did last time was impose specific tariffs on U.S. products, particularly U.S. agricultural goods. That really hurts the farmers. The last time that happened, President Trump did a subsidy to help those farmers. So although U.S. imposing tariffs on the rest of the world for the United States is inflationary, when the rest of the world retaliates, it actually is somewhat disinflationary. So prices will go down, but foreign demand will go down as well. So it's definitely not very good for the economy. I will say, Victor, looking at the trade data as well as speaking to on my show Monetary Matters with experts. For example, I spoke to a senior trade advisor to former President Biden on trade. He said it makes total sense to go battle with China very, very hard because they have a huge trade surplus with the rest of the world, but in particular the United States. But that China, the aggression against Mexico and Canada, in this person's view, Brad Setzer, was unwarranted. So I think China really is, to use your phrase, the gorilla in the room. And I think China, there is a sense, and it's not just Republicans, it's not just President Trump. There's a sense in D.C. that China it is unsustainable. The persistently large trade surpluses that China has with the United States and the rest of the world. And also, Victor, China has had a pro-trade surplus policy for over 20 years now, but they've recycled that money back into the American market, back into the European market, into the Latin American market. But if China is no longer doing that, and they're just holding on to the money as well as doing with their own projects and not recycling the money back into the financial markets, that is going to be a problem. And also, Victor, you've seen a lot of on pro-Trump outlets such as Fox News, outlets of the United Arab Emirates investing $1 trillion in the United States, Apple to invest $500 billion in the United States, TSMC Semiconductors $100 billion in the United States. According to Brad Setzer, who again worked for President Joe Biden, a Democrat, he said a lot of that numbers are sort of window dressing and they would have been spent already. And also, Victor, for our people in financial markets, I think good news for American foreign domestic investment flows, building actual factories in the United States. It could be bad news for financial markets in the United States. Every single dollar that floods into the United States, either buying US dollar products or to build factories, it either will strengthen the dollar, or if the dollar stays flat, it will have to come out of financial markets and capital markets. So I think that if China and Germany and other surplus nations have less of a trade surplus with the United States, they have less money to plow back into the U.S. financial markets. That's treasuries, that's the stock market, NVIDIA, as I heard you say, private equity, real estate, credit, everything. So I think that Trump wants to reorder global trade, and I think that will have profound impacts on the economy and in particular financial markets. And there's an opposite. Perhaps the better that Trump gets the deals for the real economy, the worse it can be for financial markets. Last thing I'll say, Victor, is I think there's a timing issue. The benefits or the perceived benefits of Trump tariffs in terms of reshoring, building stuff in America will be long-term. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years after the Trump administration even. Whereas I think the pain of tariffs will be almost immediate. I think the economic pain will be in Q2, the second quarter, and I think financial markets as forward-looking mechanisms could price that right away. So I think there's a timing issue. So there is some uncertainty about China, and I think also Mexico matters a lot because a lot of anti-China measures have been going through Mexico. So, you can't buy from China. What does China do? They just build in Mexico, and then we buy from the United States buys from Mexico. I think President Trump has been very unhappy with that. Victor.
Listen, it's amazing to listen to you explaining so good, so educational, how this is going to impact. So based on what you are telling us, do you think that realistically we can end up into a recession in 2025 in the US? Because definitely the rate of change is going dramatically into that direction. There is banks and other major people saying, watch out, we're going to go to West inflation. And most of the tone now is telling exactly what you mentioned, that they don't want to cut rates as the level they think they will. And that is basically having the market a little bit nervous, even though the market yesterday, Monday, March 24, rebounded, and today at least regained on green, barely into a mode where maybe will go higher. But what do you think, Jack, it will happen? Do you think recession is coming? And if yes, do you think it will be a painful, as you mentioned it, or do you think that then the administration will change to try to make sure the U.S. come back again?
What I can say with confidence is the growth trajectory of the U.S. economy is lower in real terms, that is inflation-adjusted terms, before tariffs or without tariffs. We were running at about 2 to 2.5% real growth. And now I think we're going to be about 1.5% growth. A lot of different estimates from economists, from banks, as you mentioned. I think it could be anywhere from a 0.3% decline in GDP, in real GDP, less growth, to as high as 1% real GDP. So I think that those are the, and it's just for 1% of GDP is about $300 billion, which is a lot. And then I think a lesser number will be collected in tariffs as a tax. So that is theoretically money that the U.S. government won't have to tax its citizens. But I think that you could have a decline in real GDP growth rate. I think there could be considerable knock-on effects, however, because that is from the consumer, and there can be compounding effects of the consumer spends less, and then the people who companies have to have less revenue, so they hire less, and it really impacts confidence. That is how a recession happens. And also, business leaders watching this program right now, reading the news, they want to make an investment in a capital project, but they say, oh, you know what? There's so much uncertainty. Let's just wait. Let's wait until the second quarter, the third quarter. If everyone does that, Victor, then that will be a recession. So I think the chance of a elevated recession in the United States are higher than they were without tariffs. We'll see if that recession finally comes, but slower growth for sure.
Listen, very happy to have you in the program. You are very successful at your age. We definitely want you back, and definitely want you to tell the people that there is a Tribune in Espanol for most of the folks that want to explain everything that we need to know. And for you and for your Monetary Matter podcast, buen día and buen negocio, Jack. Thank you very much.
Thank you.